Communication 107, Spring 2016, with an announcement regarding your second essay. The first bit of news, and it's very important, good news, is that the deadline has been extended to May 8th, which should make this all much more manageable. I've been asked to go over the guidelines with you and to provide some examples, which I'm happy to do. Had planned to do it anyway, so let's get going. I'm going to bring up the essay guidelines first and go over those with you. So this is essay number 2. Hang on a second. Computer is being a little fussy. And stretch. And close. There we go. 3 to 5 pages, 900 to 1500 words. In this paper, you will return to the communication episode, which you discussed in essay number 3, in order to analyze the structure of the interaction or explore at least one cultural dimension of the interaction. Most folks choose to analyze the structure of the interaction because most of our course text focuses on those kinds of issues, but I welcome you to explore a cultural dimension of the interaction as well, if that is of interest. I will give you some examples as we go along. So first you will briefly introduce us to the communication episode, remind us of what you learned in essay number 1, and reflect on what you hope to learn through the process of writing essay number 2. So here's option number 1, structure of the interaction. You will examine at least one, and possibly several, structures of language and or nonverbal communication in the communication episode. Begin your structural analysis by asking a research question that will frame your investigation. Underline it. Your research question should incorporate one or several theories or concepts discussed in Trenholm and Jensen, and it should address a significant issue that is relevant to your episode, something related to the social construction of reality that you discussed in paper number 2. Here are some examples of research questions that would be appropriate for your structural analysis. How do the participants use verbal and nonverbal communication to manage their needs for inclusion, control, and affection? This investigation would make use of concepts from chapters 3, 4, and 11. One of those chapters being on verbal communication, the other being on nonverbal communication, and the third talking about managing interpersonal needs for inclusion, control, and affection. By the way, that is a really excellent point of departure. I think I have an example for you on that one, which we'll get to shortly. The next one, what are the key constitutive and regulative rules that the participants are using to interpret and guide their interaction using CMM theory? That's in Trenholm and Jensen, pages 88 to 91. Another good point of departure. What kinds of damaging messages and dysfunctional communication patterns are contributing to the creation of an unhealthy relationship? This would make use of concepts from the section on dysfunctional relational patterns in Trenholm and Jensen, pages 285 to 288. You will answer your research question by demonstrating a careful and thoroughgoing examination of all of the available evidence. Use critical thinking by reflecting on your assumptions, possible alternative explanations, gaps in information, and or the implications of your findings. Option 2, cultural dimensions of the interaction. You will identify at least one way in which this interaction, or one or more elements within the interaction, is related to a broader cultural pattern, and you will discuss the significance of this relationship. Here are some possibilities, not necessarily mutually exclusive. The episode may express an existing cultural pattern. The episode may challenge an existing cultural pattern. The episode may develop an existing cultural pattern. The episode may be constrained or limited by an existing cultural pattern, or the episode may be enabled or made possible by an existing cultural pattern. Your claim that this interaction is related to a broader cultural pattern will be supported by at least a substantive discussion including 2 scholarly sources. These must be primary sources other than Trenholm and Jensen. Organize this section of your paper by stating your thesis and underlining it. Then support your thesis with evidence and reasoning. The primary evidence in support of your thesis should come from the episode and its context, and your scholarly sources. You may also incorporate additional relevant evidence as you see fit. Here are a couple of examples of how thesis statements can be used to frame this section of your paper. In this section of the paper, I will show how the pattern of communication created by the participants in Lee Mun-hwa's The Color of Fear centered on a ritual of confession, of white privilege, that emphasized etiquette, proper speech and conduct, and therapeutic results, getting in touch with one's own feelings, acknowledging others' feelings, over and above any real organizing aimed at correcting social injustices. My analysis of this pattern will include examples from the documentary and commentaries by Andrea Smith in Unsettling the Privilege of Self-Reflexivity, 2013, and Elizabeth Lash Quinn, Race Experts, How Racial Etiquette, Sensitivity Training, and New Age Therapy Hijacked the Civil Rights Revolution, a book published in 2002. Or, another example, in this section of the paper, I will show how the interaction between the mother and her young son reproduces a particular cultural set of expectations regarding knowledge and identity, primarily through their use of an elaborated code of communication. I will show how, by encouraging and enacting explicit verbal expressions of difference and possibility, mother and son reinforce the notions that knowledge is socially constructed and that personal worth and agency are achieved through one's active participation in knowledge construction. Basil Bernstein's work on restricted and elaborated codes, 1966, suggests that this mother-son dyad is reproducing a set of upwardly mobile middle-class expectations for role relationships and communication. I realize in reading these two examples, you should be familiar with the Color of Fear example. And so my example of how a theoretically informed essay might be developed in response to that film should make some sense to you, because this goes back to an example that we used at the beginning of the semester. The second example might be a little more mysterious. I don't recall whether I've shared this example with you, but I will now, and then it will make more sense. So this paragraph that's right in front of you with the asterisk refers to a communication episode that I often present in classes as an interesting example of interpersonal communication that has an interesting cultural dimension as well. It's a true story based on my sister's interaction with her 2.5-year-old son some years ago when she ran to his room, called him in and said, "We're going to have some fun, come on in." And he ran in, and she threw open his dresser drawers and threw his clothes on his bed and said, "We're going to sort your clothes, isn't that fun?" He said, "Mom, wait a minute." And he got down on all fours on the thick pile carpet and began etching a pattern in the carpet with his fingers. He said, "Mom, this is a square." And then he made some squiggly marks at one end of the square. He said, "At the top of the square, it says, 'Folding clothes is not fun.'" And then he made a squiggly mark at the bottom of the square and said, "At the bottom of the square, it says, 'Playing with toys is fun. So can we play with my toys?'" Well, his mother was amused by this and said, after kind of marveling at this little display on behalf of her 2.5-year-old son, she said, "We will get to play with your toys, but right now we're going to do the folding the clothes first. It may not be fun, but we can make it fun." And they went on from there. As I analyze this episode, I consider two different possible responses that a parent could have in that situation. The response that my sister had is one where personal worth and agency are appreciated and achieved through the child's active participation in knowledge construction. However, she could have responded differently, and in doing so could have discouraged his agency, meaning his sense of personal power and ability to initiate and create his own reality, by saying, "Don't talk back to me, boy," and she could have smacked him, or "Stop that nonsense, get up here and work with me." She could have shut him down either verbally, physically, or in both ways, and redirected him forcefully to what she was instructing him to do, which some people might consider good parenting and good discipline. But from Basil Bernstein's perspective and his cultural analysis, this is exactly the kind of communication that leads to class differences. A child who is repeatedly engaged in those kinds of episodes with a parent will more likely feel less of a sense of personal worth and agency, and will end up not going to college, for example, and settling for something less in life. That's the theory, and that's one paper that you could write. And I wanted to give you that example. Obviously, you're not going to write that paper because that's my example, but that's the kind of paper you could write if you were looking at cultural dimensions of interaction. In your conclusion, you'll comment on what, in the end, does your analysis add to our understanding of good communication. And here's my sources: Bernstein, Lash Quinn, and Smith. I highly recommend, if you're doing the cultural option, that you use Academic Search Complete. It's a library resource, which I can show you quickly now. So let's go to our library. I may have shown you this before, but it never hurts to have a quick review. And we go to Academics, we go to Library, and then we scroll down and we see the A to Z list. We click on that. And we go to Academic Search Complete. It's the second item under A's. Log in. Okay, so, cultural differences. I might be looking at African American, Asian American, Latino, Latina, Native American communication, veterans, class differences, religious differences, all kinds of things. I will, just for the sake of getting something up here quickly, put up religion, difference, culture, Islam. And let's see what we get. We get 143 hits. And all kinds of interesting articles here. Some of them full text, easily available. Some of them you have to do a little more searching, even a video here. But let's just, this might be promising. Taking culture out of multiculturalism. We have a full text PDF, so you can just download that immediately. Open it up. It's 38 pages, okay. It's long, and it's in French. Well then, are you kidding me? Not the whole thing. Okay. The abstract was in French. The status of women in multiculturalism policies has been the site of controversy. Gender issues test the limits of toleration through such customs and practices as underage marriage, honor killings, and wearing a niqab or hijab. Since the events of 9/11 and the resultant fear of radical Islam, multiculturalism has been strongly criticized. So if your episode had something to do with the wearing of the hijab, or gender issues, or multiculturalism, especially post 9/11, regarding feelings about Islam and Arabs in America, this might be a source that you could pull something good from. But you'd have to do your own study of it, obviously. And since you have 143 sources coming up, there might be something much more specific. Here we go. Religion as a... Ooh, it just jumped. Religion as a site of boundary construction. Islam and the integration of Turkish Americans in the United States. That's very specific, but if you had an example related to Turkish Americans in the United States, then that could be your paper. Your paper is supposed to focus on the episode that you initially offered and analyzed in paper 1. That's supposed to make this easier for you, actually. But if you feel like you want to leave that first paper behind, that first topic, that first example, and you've got another one, you can do that. The only difficulty there is you will have to transcribe a new episode. I can't just have a paper that's about culture or about structural elements of communication without a full, without a good transcription, 5 to 12 turns at talk minimum, and some description of the context of where you're getting your new examples. So you can switch examples, but that would entail more work for you. So it's just something to think about. All right. I'm going to also put up a couple of, I have 3 examples of this paper, essay number 2. All of them received A's last semester, so I'm going to give you these A papers as examples of how to do it in writing. I'm going to put that up right now on D2L under the content section, right next to the guidelines for this assignment. So you'll have that up there to refer to as well. And of course, you can email me with any questions you may have. Bottom line is, the paper is due May 8th by 11:59 p.m. in the Dropbox. And let's see if we can go back to those guidelines one more time. These are the guidelines. They are up on D2L. I'm going to change the date right now on the D2L version. It's May 8th now, not May 2nd or whenever. I think May 2nd was the other one. Yeah, Monday was the other one. So this should be a big relief to most of you. If you've already gotten started on it, that's good, right? You just have a little more time to work on it if you need that. Okay, I'm going to shut down this discussion right now so we can all go back to work, but I hope this is helpful. Let me hit that button and have a great week, folks. I hope it's all winding up well for you. I've really enjoyed your discussions online. I've enjoyed this class, and I'll have one more video for you to close things out before the end of the semester. I'd just like to have a few final words with you, but I wanted to get this out right away. Okay, enjoying this class. Hope you are too. It's almost over. Bye.